I would like to have the opportunity to use my life as the basis for a novel. And I would like to have the opportunity to recognize that everybody's autobiography is full of lies. We can't help that. So that there are overt lies, like if I said, you know, I lived in San Francisco for 10 years, I never did. And more interesting lies, if I told that story about when I was a child and being in trouble all the time, and maybe I was in trouble all the time, maybe I wasn't in trouble all the time. You know, I remember it as being in trouble all the time. That doesn't mean that I was in trouble all the time. So I would like to have the opportunity, first of all, to let my reader know that this autobiography is no different than any other autobiography. It is to some degree self-serving. It is to some degree as honest as it can be, but it's, you know, you can't be totally honest. But that was part of it. The other part of it was I'd love to be able to do in an autobiography what I can do in art and in science. That is to let my mind go free. So if you're writing an autobiography in the authorized way, you're supposed to be tethered to what actually happened. Now I have my notebooks, I have my memories, I have other people. I could reconstruct fairly much what happened, I think. But what I like about the theater, what I like about novels, what I like about the imagination is that what ought to have happened, what could have happened, what you know, is interesting to have happened, you can put into the same language as the language of what did happen. I don't have to put it in quotation marks. I mean, of course, I could have said, let's say there's one event in my childhood in which I set a fire. A friend of mine and I, when we were 7 or 8 years old, we set a fire in an empty lot next to a large apartment building near where my house was, and this fire became quite large, and the fire department had to come and put it out, and it was dangerous. It could have burned, it caught onto these apartment. Maybe people would have been hurt or killed, but they put it out, and then they. I was too young to be, you know, criminally prosecuted for arson. Although it wasn't a building, it was a trees and bushes, really. It was not even trees, grass and bushes. But they took me, I don't remember if they took me to a court or not, and to a judge. But I would like to write that they took me to a judge. But I do remember what the punishment was, and I don't know if it was just the police who did this, or my parents, or the judge, or whatever. I had to go to the firehouse every week, once a week. Now again, I don't remember if it was once a week, twice a month, 2 months, 1 month. I had to go there and learn about fire safety. And then the people there, the firemen, would say to me, oh, yes, we put them out, but we love them. They're beautiful, they're powerful. And now we want to see how the fire truck works. So they put me on the fire truck, and so they rode me around the block in the fire truck, and all the other kids were jealous of me. So it was early on learning that doing something bad could have good consequences. So I set a fire, and my punishment was to ride in a fire truck. I mean, hey, if life is going to do this, I better continue to set fires. So it's a kind of like to make an elaboration. Now, what if I were to say, okay, I set that fire and the building really did burn down, you know, and I go on with something more ornate, or I used to build what I would call jetties on near the ocean. Those were sticks that I hit into the sand, and I let the waves hit the sticks, and I imagined that the sticks were actual cities or people and things, and they would be smashed and drowned and so on. So I had these violent fantasies as a young child, pre-teenager. And so maybe I would, like in the autobiography, take these fantasies and report them as actualities, move them forward. In other words, to erase some of the distance between so-called accurate recollection and so-called fiction. Now, so that's what I meant, and it would be a chance to try to construct for myself a reasonably rational life plan in recollection. What happened? Why did it happen? And I would quote from my notebooks and so on and so forth. Now, whether I'll ever write such an autobiography, I don't know. One publisher at least has approached me, or they call it memoirs. And I've said no, basically because if I included everything, it would be embarrassing, or it would be improper, or it would be something I wouldn't want people to know at the present moment. But if I left something out, I would say, why do this? Yeah. I've dedicated my life to a certain kind of intellectual honesty. Now, the intellectual honesty is that at least in my notebooks, at least to myself, I know what I did and I know what happened. But that doesn't mean that everything I did or what happened you should know or the world should know. Mm-hmm. There is such a thing as privacy. Mm-hmm. So Shakespeare put his privacy to work for his characters. We know very little about his biography. So why should I write a biography, an autobiography at all? Why not just write dramas and sublimate that stuff? I don't know. But I do know that I would like to be truthful rather than honest. So the difference is this. Honesty is saying what really happened. I'll be honest, I'll confess. Truthful is kind of a conceptual construction that leads you beyond that. So usually one can be honest but not truthful, because you know what happened, but you don't really know how to construct it into a narrative that really says something about life. I would rather be truthful than honest. So if I'm going to write about my life, I'd like it to be like the Brothers Karamazov or War and Peace or something like that. I'd like to have truth in it rather than just honesty.